Well, you skipped one that
What
happened before. Norway.
Was anyone paying attention to Norway at this time? Well, we were. Let's
were.
talk about Norway.
We were.
Okay, let's talk about Norway.
Well, so this is the beauty of it. Australia's law worked, but do you think anyone is going to copy what Australia did and just say, hey, this is working well? They have to put their own creative flair on this whole thing. And like New Zealand did, make it at the item level instead of the shipment level, which adds a whole nother layer of complexity. And Norway did the same thing.
Yep.
They had to put their own spin on it. So Norway's annual threshold is 50,000 NOK. But Norway's a little smaller market for most retailers, but there's still plenty that end up hitting that threshold. But what they did is they, again, do it at the item level. Okay. So it was 3,000 NOK, an item valued less than 3,000 NOK. Which what is it? Let's put that into US dollars. That's about 285 US dollars. Okay, so at an item level. So anything valued below that is considered a low value item. So you add those up, it's over 50,000 NOK in a year, then you're supposed to register. Now, they have this scheme called the VOEC scheme.
VAT on e-commerce, I believe, right?
Something like that.
Yep.
That sounds right. So what they do is they say anything, they analyze a shipment, for lack of a better term, they evaluate a shipment and say, okay, is this shipment part of the VOEC scheme? If it checks the boxes that it can be, great. It now the tax is going to be collected and remitted directly, and it will be duty free, which is pretty awesome, right? So the check boxes that need to be for it to be part of the VOEC scheme is the shipper has to say it's part of the VOEC scheme.
On the
documentation. With their tax ID, et cetera.
Right.
We're not going to go into the details of how to do that. That's in our documentation that can be read later. And it's really, it has to be all low value items below, each one has to be valued below 3,000 NOK. And there's certain commodities that are not part of the VOEC scheme. So food items would be a classic example. So if you have anything that's not VOEC compatible, the entire shipment gets kicked out of the VOEC scheme. So you know what the recommendation was when they came out with this law?
What's that?
Just split the shipment.
That's the one that wanted to split the shipments. I knew there was one.
Yep. That was a recommendation.
That was a recommendation. Oh boy.
So the cool thing about that is if you split it, then you still get duty-free treatment on the VOEC items.
Yeah.
Right? The downside is you now have to pay shipping twice.
Which for cross-border and an item that's worth, let's say, $300, shipping is probably going to be in that, it could be in the 25 to 50 to plus range.
Depending on what it is.
US dollars is kind of the example here, but
yeah.
it's going to be expensive. And so the determination is, am I going to save on duty as much as I'm going to spend on shipping?
And what about the logic that you have to put into your system to split those shipments when you wouldn't do it at any other country?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess if you had a single, just a couple of SKUs, and this was a high volume country, I could see maybe somebody trying to game it a little bit, but what a pain. Yeah. So how do you make this not a pain?
Well, first off, I want to ask a question. Do you think the lawmakers that came up with this law have worked a day in their life in e-commerce?
No, but then you know what? I bet you the lobbyists that are talking to them also have not worked a day in their life in e-commerce.
Yeah. The practical application of this is just...
No. So much of this is driven in our industry in general, e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce, when the brokers, I'm going to blame brokers. I think when brokers sometimes get involved in these things, they don't understand e-commerce really well. And they want to be so everything's compliance, right? It's all about compliant, and there's a de minimis for a reason, and they miss common sense of this is an e-commerce shipment. Like, let's not overthink this. And a lot of this stuff gets overthought because there are some really, really smart people out there that are too smart for their own good. We've worked with some, we know some out there in the industry that, they are smart. And then you say, okay, yeah, that all is true, but it doesn't really apply or shouldn't apply in cross-border e-commerce. Like this can be so much simpler.
Yep. Well, and here's the other thing that, okay, let's simplify it. Let's just say, you know what? Forget it. I'm just going to ship everything as one shipment, and whether it's VOEC or not, that's when I'll remit. But you still have to, within your own systems, determine if it's VOEC or not. And so there's extra logic you're going to have to build anyways, but that's
to figure out if that on an individual line item level in an order, do I need to worry about VOEC?
Yep.
Jeez. Okay. So this, man, I thought the last one was complicated. This it feels more complicated. So in the end, how do you make this simple?
Well, use Zonos. That's the easiest way to do it. Use a third party like Zonos because we'll just take care of it for you, right? So, and one thing I want to talk about here is each one of it's like we started simple with Australia. It's really the most straightforward one, and then everybody's added their own unique complexity to it. But the good news is all of them have geared this towards online sellers outside the US, and they created a simplified registration system that makes it at least easy for the registration and remittance process. That part has been good up to Norway. And then you want to talk about the UK?